My name is Alara, and at 31, I find myself looking back on a life I thought I understood. The shape of it, the contours of its joys and sorrows, seemed clear to me until recently. Just a few months ago, the company I'd poured my soul into was acquired for $18 million, a sum that felt more like a dream than a number on a page. With that dream came another, a cedar and glass home perched on a coastal bluff, which I intended to secure with an $8 million cash offer. I grew up in a world defined by its limits, raised by a struggling single mother, Helen, alongside my younger sister, Chloe. I believed I knew the bedrock of family, the unshakable certainty of its bonds. It was this belief that led me to my mother's house, seeking a safe harbor for the money overnight. By morning, the harbor had vanished, and so had my mother, my sister, and the $8 million. All they left behind was a small, floral note card on the kitchen counter. It read, simply, "We needed this more than you do." My story is not one of revenge, but of reclamation. It is not about the money that was taken, but about the self that was lost and then, slowly, painstakingly, found again. It all began in Port Blossom, a city that clung to the sea like a barnacle to a ship's hull. Our two-bedroom apartment was perpetually damp, the air thick with the scent of salt and the faint, sweet smell of decay from the old wooden piers. My mother, Helen, worked tireless shifts at the Salty Gull, a diner that catered to fishermen and the few tourists who wandered off the main road. She came home smelling of fried fish and coffee, her feet swollen, her smile a thin, weary line she drew across her face for our benefit. Money was a constant, whispering ghost in our home. Christmas was a single, carefully chosen gift. Birthdays were marked by a lopsided cake from a box mix. A vacation was a walk to the other side of the beach. I learned early that my mind was the only vessel that could carry me away from Port Blossom. While other children chased waves on the shore, I was lost in library books. While my classmates discovered parties and first loves, I worked at the local bookstore, the scent of paper and ink my only vice, saving every dollar in a chipped ceramic jar. My focus was a kind of fever. My guidance counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable, once told me, "Alara, you work as if you're running from something." She was right. I was running from the tide of mediocrity that threatened to pull me under, the fear of waking up at 40 in that same damp apartment, my own dreams smelling of salt and decay. My escape came in the form of a full scholarship to Northwood University. Even with my tuition covered, I juggled 2 jobs, subsisting on instant noodles and the free cheese and crackers at evening lectures. I sent a little money home each month, a small offering to ease the burden I'd left behind. College was a whirlwind of architectural theory, late-night study sessions, and the quiet hum of the campus design studio. After graduating, I found a position at a small design firm, but the pull to create something of my own was too strong. With a friend from university, I co-founded Luminera, a platform that used an AI-driven interface to connect independent artists and artisans with ethically sourced manufacturers. The first years were a blur of 18-hour days, maxed-out credit cards, and the gnawing terror of failure. But by our 4th year, we were profitable, celebrated for our innovation and our commitment to sustainable creativity. Throughout this ascent, my relationship with my mother remained a complex tapestry, woven with threads of love and something darker I couldn't name. On the surface, she was the proud mother, her voice swelling with pride as she told friends about my latest achievement. Yet, there were moments, a flicker in her eyes, a tightening of her lips, that spoke of a different story. When I'd call, breathless with excitement about a new partnership, she would listen, her silence a heavy blanket, before steering the conversation to Chloe's latest drama or a litany of her own aches and pains. As Luminera flourished, I shared its fruits. I bought Helen a charming 3-bedroom home in Seaview Meadows, a quiet suburb away from the damp sea air. It had a garden, and I filled it with rose bushes and lavender. I paid off her debts and set up a generous monthly allowance so she could finally hang up her apron from the salty goal. She accepted it all with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Well, I suppose all those years of sacrifice paid off," she'd say, or, "It must be nice to just write a check and make a problem disappear." Chloe, 5 years my junior, seemed to drift through life on a current of her own making. She dropped out of community college, floated between retail jobs, and was perpetually entangled in some complicated, expensive drama. My mother was her constant defender. "She's a free spirit, Alara," she'd say. "Not everyone is built for boardrooms and business plans. She's finding her way." In recent years, Chloe's emergencies had become more frequent. A broken-down car, a security deposit for a new apartment, a sudden need for a wellness retreat. I always sent the money, sometimes accompanied by a gentle offer to help her with a resume or connect her with a career coach. These offers were always met with a tearful phone call to my mother, followed by a call to me, where Helen would sigh and say, "You can't just solve all her problems with your money, dear. You make her feel small." Last Thanksgiving, something felt different. Chloe kept taking hushed phone calls on the back porch, her back to the window. When I asked, Helen quickly explained that Chloe was dating someone new and was just shy about it. They exchanged a look, a quick, almost imperceptible glance that I registered but failed to interpret. In hindsight, it was a spark in a room full of gasoline. Despite these dissonant notes, I never questioned their love. We were family. That was the one truth I held as absolute. When the offer to acquire Luminera for $18 million came through, they were the first people I called. Helen wept, saying she knew I was destined for great things. Chloe shrieked with delight, immediately asking if I could now fund the boutique she'd been idly dreaming about. I was so caught up in the whirlwind of my own success that I didn't see how their joy was centered not on my achievement, but on its implications for them. The acquisition was a marathon of legal negotiations and paperwork. Through it all, I held onto the image of my dream home, a place I'd found online called The Eyrie. It was a modern masterpiece of cedar and glass on a bluff overlooking the ocean, with an infinity pool that melted into the horizon. At $10 million, it was an extravagance, but the seller, an elderly artist, had a sentimental attachment to cash. An $8 million cash offer would be an undeniable, immediate gesture of seriousness. My life felt perfect. I was financially secure beyond my wildest childhood dreams. I was about to buy a home that felt like a piece of art. And I was engaged to Leo, a kind, grounded landscape architect who loved me for the person I was, not the balance in my bank account. I had no idea that the foundation of this perfect life was built on sand, and the tide was about to come in. The day I walked into Ocean's Crest Bank to withdraw $8 million is etched in my memory with the precision of a diamond on glass. The private banking manager, Mr. Albright, a gentle man with a perpetually worried expression, adjusted his spectacles and wrung his hands. "Ms. Vance, I must strongly advise against this," he said, his voice a low hum of concern. "A wire transfer is the industry standard for a reason. It is secure, it is traceable. This presents a multitude of unnecessary risks." I had anticipated this. "I understand completely, Mr. Albright, but this isn't a standard situation. The seller has had several offers fall through due to financing. A cash offer demonstrates absolute certainty. It's a statement." He leaned forward, his worry intensifying. "We are talking about $8 million in physical currency. It will require several large duffel bags. It will weigh nearly 200 pounds. The logistics alone are a security nightmare." "I'm aware," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. "I've arranged for a private security detail to escort me directly from the bank. The money will be secured overnight, and they will escort me to the closing tomorrow morning." After an hour of disclaimers and the signing of a mountain of liability waivers, Mr. Albright reluctantly initiated the process. It would take 3 days for the bank to gather that much cash, a detail that only solidified my belief in the power of my unconventional approach. That evening, over dinner at our favorite waterfront bistro, Leo's reaction mirrored Mr. Albright's. "Alara, this is madness," he said, setting down his wine glass. The candlelight flickered in his warm brown eyes, now filled with genuine alarm. "You're making yourself a target. What if someone robs you? What if?" "I've hired Aegis Security," I countered, naming the firm run by my old college friend, Marcus. "Two of his best men will be with me every step of the way. From the bank to my mom's house, and from her house to the closing." "Why your mom's house? Why not a bank vault?" "The safe deposit boxes are too small. Besides, the safe I had installed for Mom is top of the line. It's fireproof, bolted to the foundation. I got it for her a few years ago to protect her antique teacup collection. It's a fortress." Leo ran a hand through his dark, wavy hair, a telltale sign of his anxiety. "This is an unnecessary risk, Alara. Wire transfers were invented for this exact purpose. The seller is an artist, not a businessman. He wants to feel the finality of it. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." I reached across the table and took his hand. "It's for one night. Then the area will be ours." He squeezed my hand, but his eyes remained clouded with doubt. "I just wish you'd let me come with you. You have that huge presentation for the City Park project. It's your biggest commission yet." "I'll be fine. I'll be at my mom's house. What could be safer than that?" 2 days later, I stood in a quiet, private room at Ocean's Crest as tellers methodically counted and bundled the cash. It was surreal, watching a fortune being packed into 4 nondescript black duffel bags. As promised, Marcus had sent his best, 2 serious-looking men named David and Ben. The drive to my mother's house in Seaview Meadows was a tense, silent affair. We took a winding, indirect route, ensuring we weren't followed. When we arrived at the charming house I'd bought for her, Helen's eyes widened at the sight of the security detail. Chloe was there, too, claiming she was helping Mom plan a garden party. Another lie in a long chain I had yet to uncover. "My goodness, Alara," Helen said, her hand fluttering at her throat as David and Ben carried the heavy bags inside. "Is all this drama really necessary?" "It's a necessary precaution, Mom," I replied, leading them to the study where the safe was concealed behind a large, framed painting of a lighthouse. I spun the dial, the soft clicks echoing in the quiet room, and swung the heavy door open. As the men placed the bags inside, I noticed Helen and Chloe hovering in the doorway, their gazes fixed on the duffels. I mistook their rapt attention for awe. I see now it was the look of predators assessing their prey. "We'll be back at 9 a.m. sharp to escort you to the closing," David said as they prepared to leave. "Call this number if you need anything at all." After they left, a strange, electric tension settled over the house. Helen was almost manic in her cheerfulness, humming as she prepared an elaborate dinner. Chloe followed me around, asking a stream of questions about the area, its security system, its exact location. Over dinner, my mother's questions felt oddly specific. "So, this money," she began, swirling pasta on her fork. "It's all just paper? Not traceable or anything?" "It's cash, Mom. $100 bills, mostly," I replied. "And the bank just lets you take it?" "It seems so risky," Chloe added, her voice a little too bright. There were a lot of hoops to jump through. "And as you saw, I have security." Later that evening, Helen received a phone call. She took it in her bedroom with the door closed. When she emerged, her cheeks were flushed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, just Martha from the garden club, fussing over floral arrangements," she said, avoiding my gaze. I slept that night in my old childhood bed, the mattress too soft, the floral wallpaper seeming to press in on me. Sometime after midnight, I thought I heard whispering from the hallway, but I was so tired, so keyed up from the day's events, that I dismissed it as a dream. If I had known it was the last night of my life as I knew it, I might have listened more closely. I might have seen the truth in their two bright eyes, in their strangely specific questions. Instead, I fell into a deep and trusting sleep, utterly oblivious to the betrayal that was unfolding just down the hall. I woke to the gentle morning light filtering through the thin floral curtains of my old bedroom. For a disoriented moment, I felt like a teenager again. Then the weight of the day settled on me. I was 31, I had $8 million in my mother's safe, and in a few hours, I would own my dream home. The house was unnervingly silent. By now, Helen would usually be in the kitchen, the aroma of coffee and toast a familiar morning greeting. I glanced at my phone. 7:50 a.m. "Mom?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the stillness as I padded barefoot down the hall. No answer. I pushed open her bedroom door. The bed was neatly made, pristine as if it hadn't been slept in at all. A flicker of unease. "Chloe?" I called, knocking on the guest room door. Silence. A cold dread began to seep into my bones as I walked to the study. The lighthouse painting was askew. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed it aside. The safe door was wide open. The cavernous interior was empty. "No," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "No, no, no." The whisper became a strangled cry, a denial against the stark, empty reality in front of me. I stumbled through the house, a frantic, desperate search, as if the duffel bags might have simply been misplaced. It was in the kitchen that I found it. Propped against the sugar bowl on the table was a small, floral note card. My mother's elegant cursive was unmistakable. "We needed this more than you do." My legs buckled. I sank to the linoleum floor, the note a venomous thing clutched in my trembling hand. The room tilted, the cheerful yellow walls seeming to mock me. My own mother. My own sister. They had stolen my future and left me a platitude. My fingers, numb and clumsy, finally found my phone. I dialed Leo, my sobs so violent I could barely form words. "They're gone," I gasped. "The money, it's all gone. They took it." "Alara, slow down. Breathe. Who's gone?" His voice was thick with sleep, but sharpened instantly with alarm. "Mom and Chloe," I wept. "They took the money. $8 million, Leo. They cleaned out the safe and they're gone." 20 minutes later, he burst through the door, his hair a mess, still in his sweatpants and a faded university t-shirt. He found me at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. "I've tried them both 20 times, I said, my voice flat and hollow. "Mom's phone is off. Chloe's goes straight to voicemail. They've blocked me." He knelt beside me, his hands enveloping mine. "We have to call the police, Alara. Right now." The next few hours were a surreal nightmare. 2 uniformed officers were followed by a Detective Miller, a woman with intelligent, weary eyes and a calm demeanor that felt like the only steady thing in my collapsing world. She listened patiently, taking meticulous notes, as I recounted the story, my voice breaking repeatedly. "Let me be sure I have this correct, Ms. Vance," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You willingly brought $8 million in cash to your mother's home, you placed it in a safe to which she had access, and now your mother and sister have disappeared with the funds?" Phrased like that, my trust felt like criminal negligence. Shame burned my cheeks as I nodded. "Do you have any documentation of the withdrawal?" she asked. I showed her the bank receipts and waivers on my phone. She photographed them before continuing. "Was there any unusual behavior? Anything to suggest they were planning this?" "They were interested in the money," I admitted, the memory of their wide, hungry eyes flashing in my mind. "But wouldn't anyone be? It's not something you see every day." Detective Miller's expression softened with what looked like pity. "Ms. Vance, I need to be frank with you. This is a very difficult situation. From a legal standpoint, because you brought the money here voluntarily, it could be argued in court that this was a family financial matter, perhaps even a gift that you are now regretting." A gift. The word was an obscenity. "I was buying a house today. They knew that. This was theft." "I understand that, and we will pursue every lead. But I want you to be prepared. These cases, the ones that happen inside a family, are the hardest to untangle. After she left, promising to issue an alert for Helen and Chloe, Leo held me as I cycled through waves of grief and white-hot rage. Who does this? I choked out over and over. What kind of mother does this to her child? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a photo. My mother and sister, wearing oversized sunglasses, grinning broadly as they boarded a small, private plane. The caption read, "First class all the way. Thanks for the upgrade, winky face." A moment later, a new voicemail appeared. It was Chloe, her voice dripping with a cloying, false sweetness. "Hey, big sis. I bet you're freaking out. You should try to relax. You've had it so easy your whole life, while Mom gave up everything for us. You got to be the golden child, the big success, while I was just me. Well, this is our turn. You're smart. You'll make more money. This is our only chance. Don't even think about looking for us. We'll be halfway around the world by now, somewhere they don't send people back from. Later." The casual cruelty, the rehearsed justification, it was like being stabbed and then having the assailant explain calmly why you deserved it. Handed everything? I had clawed my way up from nothing, fueled by caffeine and sheer will, and I had shared every victory with them. The house, the allowance, the endless bailouts. They planned this, I whispered to Leo, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. They've been planning this for months. "I'm calling Detective Miller back," Leo said, his face grim as he reached for his phone. As he spoke to the detective, another devastating realization hit me. The Eyrie. My beautiful house on the bluff. The closing was supposed to be in 2 hours. The life I had so carefully, so lovingly constructed, was not just cracking. It had been dynamited, and the architects of my ruin were the very people I thought I was building it for. The weeks that followed were a gray, featureless landscape of grief. My life, once so vibrant and full of purpose, had shrunk to the 4 walls of my apartment and the endless, agonizing loop of the betrayal. Detective Miller became a regular presence, her calm professionalism a small, solid rock in the churning sea of my emotions. "We've confirmed the private charter they took landed in the Cayman Islands," she told me during one of her visits, sitting at the dining table I no longer used for meals. From there, it gets murky. "We believe they took a commercial flight, but they were using high-quality forged passports." "How did they manage all of this?" I asked, my voice raspy. I'd been crying for days. A private plane, fake passports. Your sister contacted the charter service nearly a month ago. They paid in cash, a significant deposit. This was meticulously planned, Ms. Vance. We believe they had help. She paused, her gaze steady. We found searches on your mother's computer for countries with no extradition going back 4 months. There are also encrypted emails with an individual we believe is a facilitator for this kind of disappearance. The woman who taught me to be honest, who'd made me return a $5 bill to a cashier who'd given me too much change, had been conspiring with criminals. The mother I knew was a fiction. My lawyer, Richard Davies, a sharp, no-nonsense man who had handled Luminera's acquisition, was less gentle than the detective. This is grand larceny, Alara. It's that simple, he stated in his sterile downtown office. Your mother's access to the safe complicates the narrative, but it does not change the crime. He laid out the daunting legal path ahead: international motions, cooperation with foreign authorities, attempts to freeze assets that were likely already scattered and hidden. It will be a long, expensive fight, he concluded, with no guarantee of success. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman with a tranquil presence and eyes that seemed to see straight through my pain. In the safety of her office, I tried to unravel the knot of my emotions. I keep replaying my entire life, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. Every holiday, every phone call. Was every "I love you" a lie? Was she always this person, just waiting for her chance? Betrayal by a primary caregiver is one of the most profound traumas a person can experience, Dr. Sharma explained. It fractures your entire understanding of the world, of safety, of love itself. It's natural to search for signs you missed, but the responsibility for the deception lies with the deceiver, not the one who is deceived. Her words were a comfort, but they couldn't quiet the storm inside me. Sleep offered no escape. I was plagued by nightmares of chasing Helen and Chloe through winding, unfamiliar city streets, always just out of reach. I'd wake up gasping, my heart pounding, and find Leo's side of the bed empty. He had started sleeping in the guest room, a silent retreat from the thrashing and crying that had replaced my peaceful sleep. Our relationship, once my anchor, was fraying under the strain. The easy intimacy we shared had been replaced by a tense, heavy silence. "You have to start living again, Alara," he said one evening. It had been nearly a month, and I had just spent 2 hours on the phone with Detective Miller, dissecting a potential but ultimately false sighting in Panama. "Living?" My voice was sharp. "They stole my life's work, Leo." "I know that," he sighed, the exhaustion clear on his face. "But you're letting this consume you. You've barely eaten in a week. You turned down that consulting project with Synapse. Your entire world has become this investigation. What else is there?" "This is everything." "No, it's not." His voice rose, filled with a desperate frustration. "There is more to you than this. There's the woman I fell in love with, the one who could find beauty in a crumbling brick wall, who could talk for hours about art and design. Where did she go?" I couldn't answer him because I didn't know. That woman seemed like a stranger from a different lifetime. The investigation continued to unearth sickening details. Detective Miller found a hidden file on my mother's computer labeled Project Freedom. It contained meticulous notes on my finances, copies of articles about my success, and a horrifyingly clinical list titled Alara's Vulnerabilities. At the top of the list, in my mother's familiar handwriting, were 2 words: trusts unconditionally. Even worse was the discovery of a second mortgage taken out on the house I'd bought her, the money apparently lost to a secret online gambling addiction. Each new fact was another cut. The mother I had loved and supported was not a victim of circumstance, as she had so often claimed. She was a strategist, a predator who had seen my love not as a gift, but as a weakness to be exploited. The final blow came 6 weeks after the theft. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, when Leo came and sat beside me. He didn't touch me. "I can't do this anymore, Alara," he said, his voice quiet and heavy with sorrow. "I feel like I'm watching you drown, and you won't take my hand. What do you want me to do?" I whispered. "Just forget it happened?" "No. I want you to fight for your life, not just for your money. I want you to let your friends in, to let me in. But you've built a fortress around yourself, and the only thing you'll talk about is them." He stood up. "I love you, Alara. That's why this is so hard. But I need some space. I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while. When you're ready to let the world back in, call me." He packed a small bag. I watched him go, a paralysis of grief holding me in place. The sound of the door closing behind him was the loudest silence I had ever heard. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. I had lost my family, my future, my financial security, and now the man I loved. That night, staring at my hollow-eyed reflection in the dark window of my apartment, I finally hit the bottom. There was nowhere left to fall. The woman staring back at me was a ghost, haunted by a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. This wasn't me. This obsessive, broken person was not who I was meant to be. Something had to change. I just had no idea what it was, or how to even begin. The call that pulled me from the abyss came at 2:17 a.m. The phone's shrill ring sliced through the oppressive silence of my apartment, and I fumbled for it on the nightstand, my heart racing. The screen read, "Marcus Thorne. Aegis Security." "Marcus," I said, my voice a croak. "Is everything okay?" "Ms. Vance, my apologies for the hour." His voice was calm and professional, as always. "But I have an urgent development regarding your case. I need to speak with you in person as soon as possible." It's the middle of the night. Can it wait? No, ma'am. I'm afraid it can't. This is not a conversation for the phone. I can be at your building in 15 minutes. There was a gravity in his tone that banished all thought of sleep. Okay, I said. I'll be waiting. When I opened the door, Marcus looked grim. Thank you for seeing me, he said, stepping inside. Is your apartment secure? No listening devices you're aware of. The question was so bizarre it jolted me. What? No, of course not. Marcus, what is going on? He took a deep breath, his gaze direct. Ms. Vance, the money your mother and sister took, it wasn't real. I stared at him, the words failing to compute. What are you talking about? The cash in those duffel bags was counterfeit. Exceptionally high grade, but counterfeit nonetheless. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. That's impossible. I was there. I saw it come out of the bank vault. You did, he confirmed. But what you don't know is that Aegis has a protocol for high-value cash transports, something we call the Guardian Protocol. With your implicit permission, we swapped the real currency for our replicas at our secure facility the night before the transport. My permission? I never gave you permission to do that. You did, he said gently. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Do you remember at the bank? I pulled you aside for a moment. I told you we had a new insurance underwriter, and there was an additional liability waiver to sign. This is it. I took the document. It was a standard-looking form, full of dense legal text, but at the bottom was a clause authorizing Aegis to take any and all necessary protective measures, including the temporary substitution of assets for transport. And beneath it, my own signature, clear and confident. I remembered the moment distracted, overwhelmed by the sheer spectacle of the cash. I had barely glanced at the paper before signing, trusting him implicitly. I thought it was just an insurance form, I stammered. It was presented that way for your own plausible deniability, Marcus explained. I had a gut feeling about the situation, about the insistence on cash and storing it at a private residence. It felt wrong. The protocol is designed for exactly these scenarios. A last line of defense when a client might be under duress or compromised. My head was spinning. So my mother and sister, they fled the country with $8 million of fake money? Yes, and they've been spending it. Small amounts here and there. But the moment they try to make a large purchase or deposit, the bills will be flagged. And the real money? I asked, my voice trembling. It is in our primary vault. Untouched. Waiting for your instructions. A sound escaped my lips, a sound I hadn't made in weeks. It started as a choked sob, but transformed into a wild, hysterical laugh. The sheer, beautiful, cosmic irony of it. The pain, the obsession, the sleepless nights, all of it, while they were parading around the world with a suitcase full of worthless paper. They had stolen my grief, but not my fortune. When the laughter finally subsided, I looked at Marcus, and for the first time in 6 weeks, I felt a flicker of the old Alara return. The strategist. The builder. I need to see it, I said, my voice firm. I need to see the money. Of course, he replied, a small smile touching his lips. I can take you there right now. An hour later, I stood in the cold, climate-controlled air of a subterranean vault, staring at 4 familiar black duffel bags. My hand shook as I unzipped one. Inside were the neat, crisp stacks of $100 bills, real and solid. The counterfeits are tagged, Marcus said, holding up a tablet that showed a map of Europe with a single blinking over the French Riviera. We know exactly where they are. I straightened my shoulders, a newfound strength flowing through me. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the author, and I was about to write a new ending. Get me everything you have, I said, my eyes fixed on the blinking dot. Every transaction, every location. I want to know where they sleep, where they eat, and where they're going next. They wanted me to watch them live a dream. Well, the dream is about to end. Over the next 3 days, my apartment transformed from a cocoon of grief into a strategic command center. I assembled a small, formidable team. Marcus, With his security and surveillance expertise, Detective Miller, who, after her initial shock, became a crucial law enforcement liaison, my best friend and former COO, Simone, whose sharp analytical mind cut through the chaos, and Richard Davies, my lawyer, who began navigating the complex web of international law. The tracking data painted a vivid picture of my mother and sister's new life. "They're on a grand tour of ostentatious wealth," Simone observed, pointing at a digital map tracking their path from the Caribbean to Dubai, then to Monaco, and now Nice. 5-star hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, shopping sprees at Chanel and Dior. "They've also been careless on social media," Detective Miller added, displaying several private Instagram accounts they'd uncovered. The photos were carefully anonymous, a wrist dripping with new diamonds, a champagne glass against a sunset, a view from a lavish hotel suite, but I recognized my mother's hands, Chloe's posture. "They're flaunting it," I said, a quiet certainty settling over me. "They think I'm watching, heartbroken. They're performing their victory for an audience of one. Their predictability is our advantage," Marcus noted. "Based on their spending patterns and some discreet inquiries our people have made, we're 90% sure their next stop is Milan. They have a taste for the fashion capitals." "Then Milan is where we'll be," I declared. "But this isn't about an ambush. It's about a conversation. I need to look them in the eyes." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Our team would travel to Milan. Richard coordinated with the Guardia di Finanza, the Italian financial police, who were very interested in a large sum of high-grade counterfeit currency entering their country. We would let Helen and Chloe settle in, feel comfortable, and then I would confront them. 5 days later, I was flying over the Alps, the snowy peaks like jagged teeth below. Simone sat beside me, reviewing the final details. "Are you ready for this?" she asked gently. I looked out the window at the endless blue sky. "I am," I said, and I was surprised by the profound truth of the words. The anger that had consumed me had burned away, leaving behind a calm, clear resolve. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about closing a chapter on my own terms. We established our base in a suite overlooking the Duomo di Milano. Surveillance confirmed my mother and sister, traveling as Catherine and Emily Moreau, had checked into the opulent Palazzo Peri. Through a source at the hotel, we learned they had dinner reservations for 8 p.m. at a secluded table at Ristorante Al Vento. That evening, I dressed simply in a navy blue silk dress. I felt strangely serene, as if I were an actress about to walk on stage for a part one knew by heart. At 8:15 p.m., I walked into the restaurant. The air was warm, scented with truffle oil and quiet luxury. I saw them immediately. Helen was in a garish gold lame dress, her hair dyed a brassy blonde. Chloe wore a dress covered in sequins that caught the light as she laughed, scrolling through her phone. An open bottle of expensive champagne sat between them. They didn't see me until I was standing right at their table. "Hello, Mom." "Chloe," I said softly. Their faces went through a rapid-fire sequence of emotions. Shock, then fear, then a flicker of anger. It was Helen who spoke first, her voice a strained whisper. "Alara. How?" "You weren't exactly hard to find," I said, pulling out an empty chair and sitting down. "You left a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide." Chloe found her bravado first. "What do you want? If you've come to cry and beg, you can save it." A real smile touched my lips, the first in months. "Actually, no. I came to see if it was worth it." "The money, has it bought you the happiness you were looking for?" My mother's eyes narrowed. "Stop playing games, Alara." "It's not a game. It's a genuine question." I leaned forward. "But I have another one. I was talking to a currency expert recently. He told me the most interesting thing about modern $100 bills. The security features are so sophisticated that they're almost impossible to replicate perfectly." I reached into my small clutch purse and pulled out a single, crisp $100 bill, one of the real ones Marcus had given me. I slid it across the table. "This is a real one." Then I nodded toward Chloe's expensive handbag. "What you have in there, are exquisite fakes. The color drained from my mother's face. You're lying. Am I? I asked gently. You've been spending it, I know. Small amounts, cash transactions. But have you tried to wire it? To deposit it? To make a purchase that would require real scrutiny? You haven't, have you? Because deep down, it all felt a little too easy, didn't it? Chloe frantically opened her purse, pulling out a thick stack of bills, her fingers tracing the edges, as if she could feel the truth. You set us up, my mother hissed, her voice trembling with rage. No, I said, my voice full of a sadness that surprised me. I didn't. You set yourselves up. You made a choice based on greed and resentment. You built your dream on a foundation of lies. It was always going to collapse. As if on cue, two quiet, well-dressed men from the Guardia di Finanza approached our table, Detective Miller a few steps behind them. The confrontation was over. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene. Just the quiet, devastating implosion of a fantasy. In a sterile room at a Milan police precinct, I saw my mother one last time. The gaudy dress looked ridiculous under the harsh, fluorescent lights. Why? I asked, the only question that still mattered. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not a monster, but a small, deeply unhappy woman. Because I was tired of being your project, she said, her voice cracking. The poor mother you rescued. Every check you wrote felt like a judgment. Every gift felt like charity. I wanted something that was mine. So you took what was mine? She had no answer. The legal fallout was messy, but swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence, they both confessed. My mother was sentenced to 4 years in an Italian prison, Chloe to 2. I was asked if I wanted to provide a victim impact statement. I declined. The impact was clear enough. They had lost their freedom, their names, and any possibility of a relationship with me. Their punishment was the life they had chosen for themselves. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of my new home. It wasn't the Eyrie. After everything, the glass and steel fortress on the bluff felt cold and isolating. Instead, I had found a beautiful old home nestled in a grove of oak trees on a hill overlooking Port Blossom. It was made of warm wood and weathered stone, with wide porches and sprawling gardens. It felt solid. It felt real. Leo stood beside me, his arm wrapped around my waist. He had called the day after I returned from Milan. We started again, slowly, this time building on a foundation of brutal honesty and the shared knowledge of how fragile things can be. I still can't believe you did that, he said, shaking his head in wonder. The whole counterfeit plan. It was brilliant. It wasn't a plan, I corrected him softly. It was a precaution born of a tiny, buried splinter of doubt. The real brilliance was in the people who had my back when I couldn't see clearly. We were quiet for a moment, watching the evening fog roll in from the sea, softening the edges of the city below. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why she did it, I confessed. The resentment was so much deeper than I ever knew. You can't understand it, Leo said, because your heart doesn't work that way. You build things. Some people only know how to break them. He was right. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but it hadn't. It had stripped me down to the studs, forcing me to examine the very framework of my life. And in the rebuilding, I had used stronger materials. I learned that trust should not be unconditional, but it should also not be abandoned. It should be earned, nurtured, and given with open eyes. I learned that forgiveness is not about condoning the act, but about releasing its power over you. I had not forgiven my mother and sister, not yet. But I had released them. I had let go of the rage and the grief, and in their place, a quiet, resilient peace had begun to grow. I had lost a mother and a sister, but I had found myself. And as the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my soul, that it was a fair trade.